You've found it. The home of your dreams. You are so excited and you can already see your furniture there. But then you find out you're one of multiple offers. Do you know how to make your offer stand out without opening yourself up to a level of risk that just makes you uncomfortable? Many buyers feel intimidated and frustrated in a multiple offer situation. Have you been in that position? Do you feel confident that you know how to position yourself to be the winning offer in these conditions? If not, then you'll want to watch this video to learn 5 great tips on how to stand out in a multiple offer situation, commonly referred to as a bidding war. Plus, if you've watched my last video on how to become a great house hunter, then you know I often like to throw in a bonus tip at the end. If we've not met yet, I'm Shelby Brooks, and I've built a multi-million-dollar real estate business in Knoxville, Tennessee, out of being a trusted advisor for my clients. It's my mission to treat every client like family and to turn transactions into relationships. So tip 1, have a current pre-approval letter from your lender. And by current, I mean within the last few days, not months. Often, your agent can coordinate getting these updated as needed with your lender as you're going through the process. A text letting them know when you're offering, how much you're offering, and the address of the property is really all they'll need to update your existing letter. This is why working with a local lender is so important, but that could be a whole nother video in and of itself. My general rule of thumb is always try to get a new letter for each offer, customized for the amount you're offering. It's none of the seller's business what you can do, only that you can do what you're saying you'll do. When offers are very similar, I've seen decisions come down to who the lender is. So if at all possible, please work with someone local whose reputation for being professional and getting to closing smoothly and on time is well known. Tip number 2, ask your agent to show you the comp information. As agents, we have access to a few different tools to help determine the best price range for that home. Your buyer's agent can use one or more of those tools to determine what a good offer would be price-wise. Ask them to share this information with you and talk through the data. While the agent is the professional and can share the data with you and share their opinion with you, it's ultimately your decision as to what makes you comfortable. In the Knoxville area, it's common for houses to still sell for more than asking price, and sometimes even substantially more. Do your homework, know the comps, and work with your agent to determine what's going to work best for you. So tip number 3 is all about contingencies and terms. In the state of Tennessee, we have 3 standard contingencies in our residential real estate contracts. They're financing, home inspections, and appraisals. There are also a few negotiable terms, such as like whether or not you want to ask for a home warranty or a survey, or for the seller to help pay some of your closing costs. So we'll take a look at each of these. The financing contingency. Buyers qualifying for their loans is one of those standard contingencies in our contracts. By presenting that current pre-approval letter we talked about from a local lender, you're showing the buyer that odds are good you'll qualify for what you're saying you can do. This reassures the sellers when they have multiple offers to choose from, and could be what makes them choose your offer over someone else's. However, let's say something in your situation changes. You suffer a job loss and you no longer qualify for that loan. You're able to use that financing contingency to cancel the contract. This does not apply though if you still qualify for the loan. You've just changed your mind. Home inspections. You've likely heard all kinds of talk about waiving your right to a home inspection and possibly the appraisal. In terms of a home inspection, I am not personally a fan of a buyer waiving that right unless you are just very experienced in home ownership and have the ability to make substantial repairs yourself, or you've got the financial means to pay someone else to do them. It's just probably not a good idea. So now you're probably sitting there asking yourself, well, how can I win in a multiple offer if I keep this contingency? You can always consider adding a clause that lets the seller know you still want an inspection, but you're not going to ask them to make repairs. We often call this the for informational purposes only, or that you won't ask for repairs unless there's an item over a specified amount. That way they feel confident that you're not going to be nickel and diming them for nitpicky items. The third boilerplate contingency in our contracts are about appraisals. When it comes to an appraisal, if you're paying cash, you can absolutely waive that right if you want to. In fact, most of my cash buyers have opted not to have one since they've thoughtfully considered what they're offering based on those comps I provided and we talked about, and they're comfortable with the amount they're offering, regardless of what that appraisal might say. However, if you're using a loan, you typically don't have the option of waiving that appraisal. It's more often a lender requirement. Every once in a while, the lender might approve waiving one or doing what they call a desktop appraisal, where no one actually goes out to the house, but these are entirely up to the lender, not you as the buyer. In addition, in this appraisal contingency, I'm still seeing what's called an appraisal gap being offered in the contract. And that's where the buyer agrees to pay a specific amount above the appraised value up to a specific cap. And this is paid in cash at the closing table, guys. So you really need to make sure you're talking to your agent about them. These were super common between like summer of 2020 and summer of 22, less so now. I would really recommend that you talk to your agent to decide if an appraisal gap is something you're comfortable with and able to do, or if it's something that doesn't work for your situation. Now let's talk about those other terms. Remember, you're competing against other offers. So the more you ask of that seller, the less likely they're going to be to choose you. So unless there's a specific reason to ask them to pay for things like some of the closing costs, I'd advise against it in multiple offer situations. Same holds true for things like a home warranty or a survey. Unless there's a specific reason to ask for one, probably wouldn't. Or you could always consider on something like a home warranty, do you want to bump your offer price up a little bit to offset the cost of that? Or you just pay for it yourself in cash at closing. Surveys can be a tricky thing. It really depends on whether or not you're buying an established lot in a subdivision or larger acreage out in the country. You may start out thinking you don't need a survey, but then find out later that you do. When it comes to surveys, my best advice is for you to ask your agent for theirs. Tip number 4, be flexible on the closing date if you can. Ask your agent to find out if there's a certain date the sellers need to close, and then give them that date if at all possible. You can always add a clause in your offer that states you can be flexible as long as all the terms and conditions of the contract have been met and the lender has cleared the purchase for closing. Sometimes that's what wins an offer in a multiple situation, knowing there's some flexibility there. And sometimes sellers may need to rent back the home after closing as well. If your agent learns that in their conversation with the listing agent, then just discuss whether or not that's something that you're in a position to offer and if you're comfortable offering. If so, work out what kinds of terms will work for both you and the sellers. And there are documents to cover everybody, and it can work great in certain circumstances. Tip number 5, pay more earnest money and pay it quickly. All contracts in Tennessee have a section detailing earnest money. This is kind of like a good faith payment by the buyer, most often held at the buyer's agent brokerage or at the title company. It's held in a non-interest bearing escrow account. They don't want the tax nightmare of earning any interest on it, so it sits there earmarked for you until closing. A good rule of thumb in our market in Knoxville is to offer at least 1% of the offer price for your earnest money. I've had some clients offer as much as 5 or 10% before, and they've paid it within 1 day of going under contract. This shows the seller that you're serious and you're willing to have more skin in the game. This money is typically refundable to you if there are problems with your financing or the home inspection or the appraisal. So please discuss your specific situation with your realtor before deciding on an amount that works for you and what kind of terms you want to offer in terms of how long it'll be before you turn that money in. And as promised, I've got a couple bonus tips for you guys. Never forget that negotiations don't end at the contract. The Knoxville area is continuing to grow, and we're still seeing multiple offer situations. That results in sellers often having backup offers, and sometimes even a backup to their backup. Just because you got the primary contract doesn't mean you're done negotiating. Always remember that sellers can refuse any future requests you make, knowing they already have at least one buyer in place who's hoping your deal falls through. Ask yourself, is what you're thinking of asking for a big deal? And if it is, you absolutely should be negotiating it. Or is it something minor that you can handle yourself, not really a big deal? Sometimes showing a little bit of grace throughout the negotiation period results in a smoother, happier transaction and ultimately you getting the house of your dreams. Now that you know how to stand out against other offers, do you know what can go wrong if you decide to try this out on your own without working with an agent? If not, don't miss my next video that will tell you all the benefits of working with a real estate professional. If you're a buyer looking to purchase a home in the Knoxville area and want to be taken care of by a trusted advisor, I encourage you to schedule a free buyer consultation with me, where I'll walk you through my signature process of how I help buyers buy homes in Knoxville. You can schedule by emailing me at shelby@shelbybrookshomes.com.